And the saying goes, if you like it, say it aloud. If you don't like it, just be quiet. All right?
So we'd like to keep this as informal as possible, but I have the privilege, I guess, of asking the first question.
Sure.
So we were talking before the film about how it took 7 years to make, but watching the film again, I was reminded that in fact it took much longer than that, because you've been documenting Sembene's life and work, and you have hundreds and hundreds of hours of video footage, and you were telling me yesterday hundreds of hours of tape recordings as well, of conversations with Sembene. So it's really just a question about the process of making this film, working with that huge archive, and also, in the spirit of self-representation, how you worked to make sure that, your own story wasn't appropriated.
Yeah, I think I'd been literally stalking Sembene ever since I started reading his books. But between the time I read his first book in 1974, if memory serves me, to the time I met the man, it had been 17 years. And then after I met him, we worked together for 17 years. 34 years. So the process has been going on for 34 years. Of course, at first, I was not thinking about making a documentary on Sembene, because first, I did not have any training in filmmaking. And second, all I want was to gather enough information, write a biography that would do service to Sembene. Then one thing leading to the other, when he died in June 2007, in September, I published the first authorized biography in French first, which was translated into English and published by Indiana University Press in 2011. So I think this process really started in 2011 during a conversation I was having with the programmer of the Center for Contemporary Art in Santa Fe, Jason Silverman, who had extensively written about film, knows the film industry in the United States inside out. So actually he's the one who approached me and said, I would like to work with you on African cinema. Would you come help me curate some of the film? And then we became friends, to make a long story short. So when Sembene died, I came to him and said, listen, I have over 20 boxes of research from my writing, and I would like the opportunity to share that material with the public. Would you help me build a website? That was all my ambition. Never went to beyond making a website to share the material. So it's Jason who told me, no, we are not going to make a website, we are going to make a movie. I said, say what? He said, we are going to make a movie. I said, well, I have never made a movie. He said, well, we'll learn. He had never directed a movie either. So, well, if you want to, we can learn together, fall together, do whatever we can together, and we'll do as much as we can to honor the old man. It started as simply as that. But then, of course, our ambitions grew, the same way that our need for money grew, and our frustrations grew day and night. But I should say those frustrations really fueled also our resistance. Every morning, I looked at myself, I looked at the difficulties, then I remember the conditions in which Sembene made films in the 60s. Then I say to myself, if he was able to do it then, there is no reason why we should not be able to do it now. And I was lucky also to have around me very good professionals of film. So, again, over to all the difficulties, the word quit never came up. We would take pauses because we were always broke. As you see, we had to organize a Kickstarter campaign. We called on friends, we raised the fund. Then what you see is what you got. And I just hope we did justice to Sembene. But our ultimate goal is really to inspire other filmmakers. What we want there to share is Sembene's example and his message. The role an artist should play in their own society. Mostly for folks who are coming from our part of the world, yes, I would be the last one to try to dictate what a filmmaker ought to do. I mean, once you start censoring an artist and telling them what to do, then you have killed the whole idea of being an artist in the first place. Artists should be left free to do whatever they want. But my own yearning, my own mission is to see our artists, some of our artists, combine what else they do with a certain form of social responsibility. So that's why we made the film.
There's a crucial decision as well to tell the story of the man and not just the filmmaker. And you spoke a little bit about this yesterday, this tricky decision to include the story about Boubacar Boris Diop. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that, but also in the other ways that you bring Sembene's contradictions to the fore, bringing in Alain Sembene. I think it was a very courageous decision and interesting decision, so I'd love to hear more from you about how that happened.
Yeah, the process of making the film was very, very difficult. I received a lot of criticism after I published the book, and one of the articles, it was true, it was said that it was a hagiographic book, that I was only singing Sembene's praises, that I really failed to humanize Sembene. And I think in exchange in the film, to the extent that we could, within certain limit, we wanted to go beyond the legend to reveal who the man is. And some of it, I thought it would be more appropriate for his family members themselves, who know him more intimately, to give us another side of the man. We had a screening in New York, and in the public, someone, after seeing the film, said, "Wow, a great filmmaker, but, excuse my French, a dickhead." I said, yes, he is both. And like all great men, he had very difficult choices to make between devoting his life, his energy to his work, and caring for his family. Of course, we don't say, his son says here that he was almost an invisible father. He came and went. And Sembene himself talked about this in an interview with, I think, Tunisian critic Farid Bouguedir in 1979, when he was telling Bouguedir, it's a very, very difficult choice, because you are pulled between your loyalties or your duty to your family, to your children, and then something that is bigger than you, your life and your responsibility as a militant. So I think that also renders the complexity of the man. I mean, yes, everybody who has known Sembene knows to what extent he was ready to go to make his films. There was no limit to what he would do. I had a wonderful relationship with him. Even I was a victim of Sembene. We had a lot of clashes, but also I think I managed to keep my eye on the prize, to see what his ultimate goal was. And sometimes I swallowed my pride and just did the work that needed to be done. But I don't think that's exclusive to Sembene. Many people who want to do great things, I think at some point have to trust some people on their way. But I think we try to show the great artist, but we also try to show the complexities of the man. He's not just that great filmmaker. He's a very complex individual who had a family, who interacted with people, and so on and so forth. So we wanted the spectator to go away with that very complex image. But one thing that is remaining, his uncompromising love and commitment to the African people. That's the message we wanted to last.
The metaphorical idea of being a father is also very interesting, because I remember Mantia Diawara writing in his new book on African film about how at that first FESPACO, after Sembene had passed away, his presence there was still so strong, and sometimes that other African filmmakers have sort of struggled to come out of his shadow. So that generational issue is very interesting as well, and I wonder what you think about that and sort of the new generations of filmmakers coming through, but also just that idea of being the father of African cinema being crucial to FESPACO's origins, to FEPASI's origins.
Well, I don't want to be too Oedipian into this, but I think at some point Sembene himself's wish was that at some point him, the father, be killed by the children so that we can move forward. Sembene himself did not have any illusion that, of course, the filmmakers of today are not going to make the film Sembene made in 1968. Those filmmakers have to do films that are more in, more in tune with the current situations Africa is going through. I mean, he, in my view, managed to portray his moment. He managed to really chronicle his moment. Now I think the young makers cannot return and do exactly what Ousmane Sembene was doing. But at least I think he laid the foundation. He gave some guidance, and then I think now everybody has to go in their own direction. But what he always wanted in his deep in his heart, whatever they do, whether it is comedy, whatever genre you adopt, at least that as an artist, when you live in a community, that your work should reflect the daily needs of your community.
I love the fact that the film ends with audiences watching his films, because as we know, it's quite difficult to see Sembene's films today in Africa, but you've been instrumental in helping to get the films restored. So I wonder if you could share some of that story, and also the very inspirational story of your plans to screen this film in Senegal and also throughout Africa in a kind of act of Pan-Africanism.
Yeah, I think that's what, if there is really something I gained from the process of making this film, it is this. It taught me first to challenge myself. I mean, I did not even know what a camera angle was. I'm not even sure I still know what it is. But I managed to find people who knew how to do it. And the second, to take myself out of my comfort zone, out of the privacy of my study, and to work with a group. And I think that really enriched my experience. You are alone, you are writing your book, you are all by yourself. But a film, every morning you go, you have a meeting. I mean, I brought my own ideas, other people brought their ideas. And the film you see is really the result of a collaborative work. The same way, working on Sembene's archive, many times I had to, when I first returned 4 years after Sembene's death, the footage you see, nothing has been staged. The first time I walked in that house, the house was completely littered by all those papers sitting there. And it is not unusual to go next to our administrative building in Senegal, to go buy peanuts and to have the peanuts woman wrap the peanuts in some official document. Meaning, we need to discipline ourselves to archive our important documents. So anyway, the house was littered with documents. It took me weeks, with the help of friends, to organize all that and to put it in box, to have a friend archivist who helped me do a first sorting out of the documents. And now I'm talking to many institutions to see if those documents can find a house. Because yes, he left here the film, but I think there is room for research on Ousmane Sembene. Actually, since his death in 2007, at least those I know of, there have been at least 4 PhD dissertations on Sembene. But the researchers have always lamented the lack of written elements from Sembene himself. So I hope, maybe I'm being too optimistic here, in the next 6 months you will have a big announcement as to what university has acquired and archived Sembene's work. And I would not have been able to do it without the help of many other people who did that. So it is really, I want to take credit for this. It has really been a collaborative work. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and it also takes more than a village to make this kind of film and to do this kind of work.
And the restoration of his films?
Yes, the restoration also, I played a part of it, but I'm not going to take full credit or the whole credit, because yes, we introduced the Sembene family, Alain, to the World Cinema Foundation in New York, and they worked very hard. And I think the Bologna Cinemateca also, and with Martin Scorsese himself. And it was 5 years after Sembene died, it was very, very difficult to find some of his film in circulation. And the Black Girl the negative was in a very, very bad condition. There was no way to make other copies. So Scorsese and his team committed to restoring all of Sembene's films, and Criterion in New York also committed to distributing them. So that's on the way. We already have Black Girl, we have Borom Saret that are already re-injected in the market, and they are working very intensely. Hopefully, in the next 2 years, if all the funding has been restored, I think all of Sembene's film will be in circulation again, except one, unfortunately, we are still working on, which is Fat Kiné. Fat Kiné was edited in Tunisia, and I don't think his children have been able to locate the negative yet. But out of the 12 feature films he made, I mean, we are guaranteed 11 are going to be restored and re-injected in the market.
Can I open to questions now? We have a roving mic, so any questions? Okay, we have one down front here. So we'll come back to you, Professor Bakari.
I saw this film also at the London Film Festival. I'm feeling quite emotional because last night I saw the film Versus about the life and films of Ken Loach. So seeing two films about sort of, you know, cinematic and political fathers to me, it gets quite emotional. There was a lot of emotion in the Ken Loach film. But it's a question on more on updating Sembene's legacy into sort of Pan-Africanism today. Because when I ask an African about, you know, give me an African perspective, sometimes I feel that's a fatuous and silly question. Because Africa's so vast, and if you look at the European Union, the debate about the European Union, you could fit the whole of the European Union as it exists into a single African country. So I think sometimes it's a bit false, you know, when you ask someone from an African perspective. So if you could just say something about the modern Pan-African perspective and project, and the, you know, the concepts of African unity as they exist sort of today, because you talked about handing the baton down to modern filmmakers and the younger generation. If you could just say something about modern Pan-Africanism as you see it, and what some of the younger generation in Africa perceive to be modern Pan-Africanism today.
Well, I cannot speak for the the younger filmmakers that are. Well, all I can tell you already, I think in the late 60s, a few years after the Organization of African Unity was created in Addis Ababa in 1963, Sembene and other filmmakers of his generation came with this initiative, which is FEPASI, the Pan-African Federation of Filmmakers. And I think that that organization is still functional. Now, how well is it functioning? I could not tell because I've never been to their meetings. All I can guarantee you right now, there are young filmmakers all over the continent who are in organizations. Maybe they have not created one single continental organization, but there are certainly groups of filmmakers who work together. In Senegal, you have young filmmakers who have created neighborhood films, and there are also festivals all over the continent. You have the festival in Carthage, which was created, I think, in the late 60s, which is still functional. You have FESPACO, which was created 69-72, which is still functional. You have festivals in Durban. We have festivals in Egypt. So I think they are pan-continental organizations, but either one single umbrella organization all over the continent, except FESPACI, I could not speak of any. But maybe there are some other people in the room who could talk about that.
A question from Professor Bakari.
Thank you, Samba. I just want to ask a question about the work Sembene was doing towards the end of his life. There are images of Samori Toure, and I'm told that was the project he had been nurturing for a number of years. Could you just say a little bit about that process, and perhaps from your knowledge, what would have been the significance of that film in view of the body of his work, if he had realized it?
Yeah, Sembene, I think Samori, as far as I know, was the most ambitious project Sembene has ever undertaken. I have seen the script of the film. It is 3 large books, about 2,324 pages. And I know he had already spent 30 years researching first from this French historian who had written about Samori. So it took him about 10-year research. I know he had already done the scouting. He had gone to different countries. I also know that he had done the budget. I know he had already done the budget of the film. I know he had already done the casting. I'm not going to tell you who he had in mind for Samori, but I know everything was in place. The only thing that was missing was money. And as far as I know, there were 2 African head of states that had promised funding. That was Omar Bongo, who had promised money. Ahmed Sekou Toure had also promised money. But I think even if in the last years he had received that money, with his age and all the energy that would have been required to make that film, I don't think he would have been able to make it, because it's about over five countries, 9 hours for television. So it was a huge project. And recently, after he died, there is a production company in South Africa, I think, which is headed by Thabo Mbeki's brother, who also wanted to buy the script from Sembene children and make the film. How far have they gone? I don't have a clue. But still, the scripts are there. I wish some historian or some scholar would come and look at them and see, maybe if they cannot be made a film, see how they can be written at least as a history book or whatever. I think it is still usable, but I don't have the energy yet to do it. But all the script is ready. The scouting is ready. The casting is ready. The budget is ready. And I also know in June 9th, 2008, a year after Sembene died, the Senegalese government had organized a tribute to Sembene. And I was there. I was an eyewitness. Our then President, Abdoulaye Wade, had promised 3 billion CFA to make the film happen. But then, of course, once the cameras were turned off, the 3 billion CFA disappeared. So, and that is also another project, actually, Sembene's masterpiece, That's Bits of Wood, he wrote in 1960, which, as far as I know, is one of the most important historical novel ever written in Africa, which chronicled, of course, the first trade union strike in between what was then called the French Sudan, which is now Mali, and Senegal. I know for years Danny Glover had wanted to adapt that film to the screen, and I know the fact that a year before Sembene passed, they had signed a contract giving Danny Glover the authorization to make a film. I know also the fact that Sembene had asked Timothy Bassori of Côte d'Ivoire to write a script under his own supervision. That's where my knowledge stops. So there are boxes and boxes of documents, and I think scholars, filmmakers could continue Sembene's work in the next 20 years.
I think we have time for one more question. There's somebody in the middle here.
When Sembene traveled to American universities and then screenings all around the world, it seemed that he was very proud of his films being screened, as he commented that, I am not lucky to be here, you are lucky to have me. And he seemed to be very, he recognized his importance when he went to these screenings. So what struck me was the BBC interview where the reporter said, "You don't like to be called the father of African cinema." So the question I have for you is, because he was so proud of his films and he recognized his importance in African cinema, why did he not like to be called the father of African cinema?
Yes, I think it's very difficult for me to sit here and to speculate on the possible meanings of that, but certainly sometimes I would come to Sembene, very, very affectionate. I said, "Oh, Vieux Sembene." He said, "No, don't call me Vieux, because when you say Vieux, there's always an epithet that follows that people don't say, but I know they're thinking about it." I say, "What is a Vieux con? You old stupid man." No, I mean, I think he also told me many times that he did not believe in gerontocracy, that it's not because he's the first to make films that is oldest, that he should bearing a banner as being the father of African cinema. So that's as much I can say. I know he did not like the name of African, but at times also he really did bask on, he glowed under that, because if you go to Ouagadougou, in Fespaco, I mean, they had literally created something they would call a baobab tree, meaning a tree under which all the old filmmakers would sit down, and very often young filmmakers would come to just pay visit, ask advice, and so on and so forth. So yes, he's the father. Even the father of African cinema, I think now has come the time for me to also put this in historical context. Yes, Sembene is, of his generation, he has been the most prolific filmmaker. Yes, he's the first to have made a feature film. But historically, he's not the first to pick a camera and to make a film. The first to make a film in sub-Saharan Africa is Paulin Soumanu Vieira, who in 1957 made a film called Afrique sur scène. It was his no.
No, Sudanese. Jabala Jabara.
Okay.
No, please.
This is going to have to lead into debate. And
No, the Sudanese filmmaker,
Okay.
Jabara.
Okay. What year?
Huh?
Yeah.
What year was that?
It was,
Early 50s.
no, it was 48, I think, or 49.
Okay. Where did he make the film?
In Sudan.
In Sudan, okay. All right. So one lesson of history then. So that even reinforces the fact that Sembene being called the father of African cinema, that need to be qualified. Others made films before he did, but undoubtedly he has been the most prolific filmmaker of his generation if in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, if you take the whole African continent, already in the 20s in Egypt they were making films, and I think that's very, very accurate. But I think also the quote-unquote father is just a term of endearment he received from many filmmakers, but it is not historically accurate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're going to have to unfortunately close our conversation then, but thank you so much again, Professor Gadjigo, for
Thank
bringing
you.
your beautiful film, and we wish it very well with the screenings in Senegal and throughout Africa.
Thank you.
And also there is a DVD, isn't there?
Yeah, a DVD just came out with an extra actually, and you can also have it on Netflix, and you can you can use your credit card through Amazon to get the film. So now this is a commercial page. Yes, we are doing our best to reach a wider audience.
And the DVD also has Professor Gadjigo's other film, which is The Making of Moulade, where he filmed Sembene making that film. So that's an extra on the DVD.
Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Professor Gadjigo.